The scent of lemon polish clung to my fingers like an accusation. I pressed them against the cool marble of the bathroom sink, watching water cascade over my reddened knuckles, as steam from the shower I'd just scrubbed fogged the mirror before me. My reflection appeared in fragments through the mist, a ghost haunting someone else's palace. 6 months. That's how long I'd worked in Harrison Cole's mansion, moving through its corridors like smoke, seen but never truly observed. I was furniture with a pulse, as invisible as the imported rugs beneath his Italian leather shoes, or the crystal chandeliers that cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. I turned off the faucet and reached for the microfiber cloth draped over my shoulder, the 100th surface I'd touched today, maybe the 1000th. My lower back throbbed with that familiar ache that came from bending, reaching, kneeling in service to a world I could observe, but never inhabit. Outside the bathroom window, the manicured grounds stretched toward iron gates that kept the world out, and me locked in this strange purgatory of proximity to wealth I'd never possess. Harper, the study needs attention before Mr. Cole returns. Mrs. Chen's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp and efficient as always. She appeared in the doorway, her severe gray bun pulled so tight it seemed to stretch her features smooth. The head housekeeper had a way of materializing without sound, a skill I suspected she'd perfected over decades of serving men who preferred their staff invisible. I nodded silently, gathering my supplies. The caddy felt heavier today, or perhaps I was simply more tired than usual. Sleep had become elusive lately, my mind too crowded with calculations. Rent was due in 3 weeks. My brother needed another surgery. The car was making that sound again, the one the mechanic said would cost $800 to fix. The study was my least favorite room. Not because of the work it required, the endless shelves of leather-bound books that gathered dust Mr. Cole never disturbed, the massive mahogany desk where he conducted business I didn't want to understand. No, I hated it because it smelled like him. Cedar and something darker, more complex. A cologne that probably cost more than my monthly salary, lingering in the air long after he'd left, a reminder of his presence even in absence. I moved methodically, dusting each shelf from left to right, top to bottom. Routine was safety. Routine was invisibility. Keep your head down, do your work, collect your paycheck. That was the mantra that had kept me safe for 6 months, ever since I'd fled Colorado with nothing but a backpack and terror clawing at my throat. Through the tall windows, I could see the circular driveway where Mr. Cole's cars sat like predatory animals at rest. A black Bentley, a silver Porsche, a vintage Jaguar he never drove but couldn't bear to part with. Mrs. Chen had told me once in a rare moment of conversation. Men like him collected beautiful things, I'd learned. Cars, art, women who draped themselves over his arm at the charity galas I helped prepare for but never attended. My cloth caught on something as I wiped the bottom shelf. I bent down, discovering a photograph that had slipped behind a row of books. 2 boys, maybe 8 and 10, grinning at the camera with matching dimples. The older one had his arm slung protectively around the younger one's shoulders. Both had the same dark hair, the same sharp jawline that would later define their faces. Harrison Cole and his brother, I realized, before life had carved them into the men they'd become. I shouldn't have looked. It felt like trespassing, seeing this glimpse of humanity in a man I'd trained myself to think of as simply the boss, a figure who existed in a different dimension from my own reality. I quickly replaced the photo and continued my work, trying to unknow what I'd just learned, that Harrison Cole had once been a child who smiled freely, who protected someone smaller than himself. Mr. Cole will be home in 30 minutes. Mrs. Chen's voice made me jump. I hadn't heard her return. Finish up and prepare the master suite. He has guests for dinner tonight. Guests meant extra work. It meant staying later than my scheduled shift, meant missing the 6 o'clock bus and waiting for the 7:15. It meant arriving home after dark to my studio apartment in a neighborhood where the streetlights were more broken than functional. But I nodded again. that universal gesture of compliance I'd perfected. "Yes, Mrs. Chen." The master suite occupied the entire East Wing's second floor. I'd been inside perhaps a dozen times in 6 months, always when Mr. Cole was away, always feeling like an intruder despite being there to clean. The space was massive, yet somehow impersonal, all clean lines and expensive furniture arranged with designer precision. The bed was a California king with sheets that felt like water under my fingers when I changed them. The bathroom rivaled a spa, with a rainfall shower large enough for 3 people and a soaking tub positioned to overlook the grounds. I moved through my tasks efficiently, changing the sheets, restocking the towels, ensuring every surface gleamed. In the closet, rows of suits hung like soldiers at attention, each one probably worth more than my car. I tried not to touch them more than necessary, afraid somehow that my presence might contaminate their perfection. I was replacing the soap dispenser when I heard it. The low rumble of an engine, distinctive and powerful. The Bentley. He was home early. Panic fluttered in my chest. I wasn't supposed to be in his private rooms when he was home. That was an unspoken rule, a boundary I'd carefully maintained. I quickly gathered my supplies, moving toward the door. But the sound of footsteps on the stairs made me freeze. Too late. Harrison Cole appeared in the doorway, and for the first time in 6 months, he looked directly at me. Really looked. Not through me as he usually did, but at me. He was taller than I'd realized, or perhaps I'd simply never been this close when he was paying attention. His dark suit was perfectly tailored, emphasizing broad shoulders and a lean frame that suggested controlled power. His hair, almost black, was swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and planes with eyes the color of winter storms. "You're still here." His voice was deeper than I remembered from the few times I'd heard him speak to Mrs. Chen or the other staff. It wasn't a question, just an observation, but something in his tone made me feel suddenly, acutely aware of my own appearance. My uniform, a plain black dress that hung loose on my thin frame. My hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. My hands, red and rough from chemicals. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. Mrs. Chen asked me to prepare your suite for tonight. I was just finishing." I kept my eyes lowered, clutching my caddy like a shield. Silence stretched between us, lasting seconds that felt like minutes. I could feel his gaze on me, assessing, calculating. Men like him were always calculating. I'd learned that the hard way. "What's your name?" he asked, and the question shocked me into looking up. "Harper, sir. Harper Mitchell." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "How long have you worked here, Harper?" 6 months, sir." 6 months, he repeated, almost to himself. Then, with a dismissive wave, "You may go. Be more mindful of the timing in the future." I nodded quickly, moving past him toward the door, careful not to let any part of me brush against him in the narrow space. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard him speak again, so quietly, I almost thought I'd imagined it. I should have noticed before now. I didn't respond, didn't acknowledge the words that made something tighten in my chest with warning. I simply walked away, counting my steps, breathing carefully, reminding myself of the rules that had kept me safe. Stay invisible. Don't be seen. Don't be remembered. But as I descended the service stairs to the kitchen where Mrs. Chen waited with a list of tasks for the dinner party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. That after 6 months of successful invisibility, Harrison Cole had finally seen me. And I had no idea what that might cost. The dinner party began at 8. I wasn't part of the serving staff. That was handled by the catering company Mr. Cole hired for such events. But I was needed for prep work, ensuring every room the guests might enter was immaculate, every detail perfect. I moved through the downstairs rooms, straightening paintings that didn't need straightening, adjusting flowers that were already perfectly arranged. Through the tall windows of the dining room, I could see guests arriving, expensive cars pulling up the circular drive, women in evening gowns that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, men in tuxedos who moved with the confidence that came from never having to worry about money or consequences. This was Harrison Cole's world. A world where power was currency, where violence lurked beneath polished surfaces, where loyalty was bought and betrayal was punished. I'd heard the whispers among the staff, the careful words that never quite named what everyone knew. Harrison Cole wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was something more dangerous, more complex. The kind of man my mother would have warned me away from, if she'd still been alive to warn me about anything. But that was exactly why I'd taken this job. Because men like Harrison Cole existed in a sphere so far above my own that our worlds should never intersect. I was invisible here, just another face in the machinery that kept his life running smoothly. And invisibility was safety. Or it had been, until this afternoon. "Harper," Mrs. Chen's sharp voice pulled me from my thoughts. The powder room near the study. Someone spilled wine. Handle it immediately. I grabbed my emergency kit and hurried toward the study, my practical flat silent on the marble floors. The powder room was just off the main hallway, close enough to the entertaining spaces that guests used it, but far enough from the kitchen that I rarely had reason to be there during parties. The wine stain was worse than I'd expected, deep red seeping into the cream-colored hand towels. I worked quickly, applying stain remover, blotting carefully. Through the partially open door, I could hear the murmur of conversation from the study, male voices low and serious. "The shipment arrives Tuesday," Harrison's voice, unmistakable now that I'd heard it directed at me. "Dominguez guarantees no complications." "And if there are complications?" Another voice, one I didn't recognize, slightly accented. "Then Dominguez becomes a complication himself." The casual way Harrison said it made my hands still on the towel. "I don't tolerate failure, Marcus. You know this." I should leave, should gather my things, and disappear before they realized I was within earshot. But my feet seemed rooted to the spot, horror and fascination warring within me. "What about the Irish?" Marcus again. "They're not happy about the West Side arrangement." A sound that might have been a laugh, dark and without humor. "The Irish haven't been happy since I took the docks. They'll adapt or they'll disappear. Either way, it's not my concern." I forced myself to move, to pack up my supplies as quietly as possible. But as I reached for the door handle, a hand suddenly gripped it from the other side. The door swung open, revealing Harrison Cole standing in the hallway, those winter storm eyes locked on mine. For the second time that day, he truly saw me. And this time, calculation mixed with something else in his expression. Something that made my heart hammer against my ribs. Harper. My name in his mouth sounded different than when Mrs. Chen said it. Intimate somehow, despite the professional distance in his tone. "You've been busy today." "I was just cleaning up a spill, Mr. Cole." I held up the stained towels as evidence, as if he'd accused me of something more sinister than eavesdropping. "Of course." He stepped closer, forcing me to step back into the powder room. "Tell me, Harper, how much did you hear just now?" The truth would have been too dangerous. "Nothing, sir." I was focused on the stain. He studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if he could hear my heartbeat, if fear had a scent he could detect. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Good. It's important that staff maintain discretion. You understand discretion, don't you, Harper?" "Yes, sir. I thought so." He glanced at the watch on his wrist, platinum, and probably worth more than my car. "You've worked late enough. Mrs. Chen can handle the rest. Go home." It wasn't a suggestion. I nodded, clutching my supplies, trying to move past him in the narrow doorway. His hand caught my arm as I passed, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop me. "Harper," his voice had dropped lower, almost gentle. "You seem like a smart woman, smart enough to know that some things are better left unheard, unremembered. Yes?" I met his eyes, those dangerous storm-gray eyes, and saw in them something that chilled me more than any threat. Interest. He was interested in me, and that was more terrifying than his implied warning. "Yes, Mr. Cole, I understand." He released my arm, and I fled. The week that followed the dinner party was a study in careful avoidance. I adjusted my schedule, arriving earlier and leaving later to minimize the chances of encountering Harrison Cole. Mrs. Chen noticed but said nothing, simply adding more tasks to my growing list. The master suite, the study, the private gym, all the spaces he inhabited, but only when he wasn't there to observe me inhabiting them. Friday arrived with the promise of 2 days off, a brief respite from the constant vigilance required to maintain my invisibility. My friend Sophia had been begging me for weeks to join her for a night out, to remember what it felt like to be something other than tired and worried. "Come on, Harper," she'd pleaded during our lunch break at the diner where she waited tables. "When's the last time you wore something other than that uniform? When's the last time you danced?" The answer was Colorado, but I didn't say that. Didn't mention the club where I'd met him, where his smile had seemed charming instead of controlling, where I'd been too young and too naive to recognize danger when it bought me drinks and told me I was beautiful. But Sophia was right. I was 26 years old and living like I was 60. Every day a repeat of the one before. 2 years of running, of hiding, of being afraid to exist too loudly in case someone noticed me. Maybe it was time to remember who I'd been before fear had taught me to disappear. "Okay," I'd said, surprising both of us. "Just for a few hours." Now, standing in front of my mirror in the studio apartment that smelled faintly of mildew in the Korean restaurant downstairs, I barely recognized myself. The red dress Sophia had lent me fit like it had been designed for my body, hugging curves I'd forgotten I had, falling to mid-thigh in a way that felt scandalous after months of shapeless black cotton. I'd left my hair down, dark waves falling past my shoulders. Makeup transformed my face, highlighting cheekbones I didn't know I had, making my hazel eyes larger and more noticeable. Red lipstick, the final touch, made me look like someone else entirely. Someone who didn't scrub toilets or worry about bus schedules. Someone who existed in spaces illuminated by something other than harsh fluorescent lights. "Holy shit, Harper." Sophia stood in my doorway, her own dress electric blue, her approval evident. "You look incredible, like a completely different person." That was the point, wasn't it? To be someone else for a few hours. To pretend my life was different, that I was different. The club was called Velvet, and I knew even before we arrived that it was one of Harrison Cole's properties. Sophia had insisted it was the best place in the city, had used her connections to get us on the guest list, and I'd agreed, because what were the chances he'd be there on a random Friday night? Apparently, excellent. I saw him the moment we walked through the doors, past the velvet ropes and the bouncers who'd nodded Sophia through with recognition. He was on the second level, in the VIP section that overlooked the main floor, surrounded by the same kind of men who'd been at the dinner party. Dark suits, cold eyes, the machinery of power at rest, but never truly off-duty. My first instinct was to leave, to grab Sophia's arm and invent an emergency that required our immediate departure. But she was already pulling me toward the bar, her energy infectious, and I told myself it didn't matter. He wouldn't recognize me here, dressed like this, existing in a context so far removed from his mansion that we might as well be on different planets. I was wrong. It happened during the second song, after the vodka had started to warm my blood, and Sophia had convinced me to dance. The music was loud enough to feel in my chest, bass thrumming through the floor, lights strobing in patterns that fragmented reality into something dreamlike. I let myself move, Let the rhythm take over. Let my body remember what it felt like to exist without apology. I didn't notice when the crowd around us shifted. Didn't see him descend from the VIP section until he was standing at the edge of the dance floor. His eyes locked on me with an intensity that cut through the music and the lights and the vodka haze. Harrison Cole was staring at me. Not through me, not past me, but directly at me. And in his expression, I saw something that made my breath catch. Shock, recognition, and beneath both, something darker and more complicated. Want. Sophia noticed him too, her eyes widening as she leaned close to shout in my ear. "That's Harrison Cole. Holy shit, Harper, he's looking right at you." I forced myself to keep dancing, to pretend I hadn't noticed, but it was impossible to ignore the weight of his gaze. He moved closer, weaving through the crowd with purpose, and I knew I was out of time, out of places to hide. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne even over the scent of bodies and alcohol. Close enough to see the slight widening of his pupils, the tension in his jaw. "Harper." Not a question this time, a statement of fact, of recognition, of something I couldn't quite name. The music was too loud for conversation, but somehow I heard my name in his mouth as clearly as if we were alone. Sophia had melted away, smart enough to sense danger, or simply giving us space. Either way, I was alone with him in a crowd of hundreds. I stopped dancing, suddenly self-conscious in the red dress, hyper-aware of every inch of exposed skin. "Mr. Cole, you look different." His gaze traveled over me, not lewdly, but with the same calculation I'd seen in his study. "I almost didn't recognize you." That had been the point, but saying so seemed dangerous. "It's my night off." Clearly. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "This is one of my clubs. Did you know that when you came here?" "No." The lie came easily, born of practice. My friend chose it. He studied me for a long moment, the music pounding around us, lights fragmenting his face into sharp angles and shadows. Then, unexpectedly, he extended his hand. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request, but it also wasn't quite a command. Somewhere in between, in that space where refusal would create more problems than compliance. I placed my hand in his, and his fingers closed around mine with careful firmness. He pulled me closer, one hand settling at the small of my back, the other still holding mine. We moved together, his body a solid presence against the chaos of the crowd. His movements surprisingly fluid for a man who seemed carved from stone. "You're good at this," he observed, his mouth close to my ear so I could hear him over the music. "Dancing, being someone else." Warning prickled along my spine. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" His hand at my back pressed slightly, pulling me closer. "You're very careful at the house. Quiet, invisible. But this..." His gaze swept over me again. "This is something else entirely. Which one is real, Harper? The maid or the woman in red?" I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Not painful, but immovable. "Mr. Cole, I should go. My friend is waiting." "Your friend is dancing with Marcus." He nodded toward the bar where Sophia was indeed talking animatedly with the man from the study, the one with the accent. "She seems occupied." "It's late. I should..." "It's barely midnight." His thumb traced small circles on my lower back, the gesture almost absent-minded but sending sparks along my spine. "Tell me something, Harper. Why did you come to work for me?" The question caught me off guard. I needed a job. "You have a college degree." Another calculation, another piece of information he'd gathered about me. "English literature from Boulder. You could have done better than housekeeping." My blood ran cold. He'd looked into me, investigated me. How much did he know? I like the work. It's honest. Honest. He repeated the word like he was tasting it. Is that what you're being right now? Honest? The song changed, something slower, more intimate. Around us, the crowd shifted, couples pulling closer. Harrison's hand moved from my lower back to my waist, his thumb brushing the bare skin where the dress ended and my skin began. I should go, I said again, more firmly this time. Why? His voice had dropped lower, intimate despite the public setting. Are you afraid of me, Harper? The honest answer was yes, but not for the reasons he probably thought. I was afraid of the way my body responded to his touch, of the heat building between us despite every rational thought screaming at me to run. I was afraid of being seen, of being known, of being wanted by a man whose power could crush me without effort. I'm afraid of making a mistake, I said finally, the most truth I could offer. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the stone. We're just dancing, Harper. Nothing more. But we both knew that was a lie. This was something more, had been something more from the moment he'd looked directly at me in his bathroom doorway. The question was what we were going to do about it. The answer came in the form of Marcus appearing at Harrison's shoulder, his expression urgent. Boss, we have a situation, the West Side. It can't wait. Harrison's jaw tightened with frustration, but he released me immediately. Duty before desire, I supposed. Always, for men like him. I have to go. His hand lingered on my waist for a second longer than necessary. But Harper, we're going to continue this conversation. Before I could respond, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd with Marcus at his heels. I stood alone on the dance floor, my body still humming from his touch, my mind racing with implications I didn't want to examine. Sophia appeared beside me, her eyes wide. What the hell was that? Your boss? You're dancing with your boss? It was nothing. I grabbed her arm, suddenly desperate to leave. Let's go. Please. We left Velvet, but I could feel his eyes on me the entire way to the door. When I glanced back, I saw him standing on the second level, framed by the VIP section's windows, his phone to his ear but his gaze locked on me. He watched me leave, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that Monday morning would bring changes I wasn't prepared for. I called in sick Monday, and Tuesday. Wednesday, I forced myself to return, armed with the hope that enough time had passed for Harrison Cole to lose interest in whatever curiosity I'd sparked, that I could slip back into invisibility like pulling on a familiar coat. Mrs. Chen met me at the service entrance with her usual severe expression, but something in her eyes had changed. Wariness, perhaps. Or pity. Mr. Cole wants to see you in his study. Immediately. My stomach dropped. I should change first, put my things away. Now, Harper. Her tone left no room for negotiation. The walk to the study felt like a march to execution, each step echoing on marble that suddenly seemed too loud, too present. The house was quiet, empty of the usual cleaning staff bustling through their routines. It was just after 8 in the morning, an hour when Harrison should have been at one of his downtown offices, not here waiting for me. I knocked on the study door, my knuckles barely making a sound against the heavy wood. Come in. His voice, muffled by the door but still unmistakable. He was seated behind his desk, exactly as I'd seen him in photographs I wasn't supposed to look at. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, the uniform of power worn with casual confidence. But his tie was loosened, top button undone, suggesting he'd been there for hours already. Sit. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. I remained standing, clutching my bag like a shield. Mrs. Chen said you wanted to see me, Mr. Cole. If this is about Friday night, I apologize for any... Sit down, Harper. Not quite a command, but close enough. I sat, perching on the edge of the chair, every muscle in my body coiled for flight. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he opened a folder on his desk, turning it so I could see its contents. Photographs. Documents. My entire life laid out in neat, organized pages. Harper Elizabeth Mitchell, he began, his voice neutral. Born in Boulder, Colorado, 26 years ago. Parents deceased in a car accident when you were 19. One younger brother, currently in assisted living in Denver due to cerebral palsy. You put yourself through college working 3 jobs, graduated with honors. Started dating Ryan O'Sullivan your senior year. My blood turned to ice at the name. My fingers dug into the arms of the chair. Harrison continued, his gaze never leaving my face. Ryan O'Sullivan, son of Patrick O'Sullivan, head of the Irish mob in Denver. Also known for a pattern of controlling behavior, restraining orders filed by 2 previous girlfriends, accusations of assault that never led to charges because witnesses suddenly developed amnesia. Stop. The word came out hoarse. Please stop. He closed the folder, leaning back in his chair. You left Colorado 2 years ago. Changed your appearance, your last name. Mitchell instead of Mackenzie. You've been running, Harper. And you chose to hide in my house. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I didn't know who you were when I applied for the job. I just needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could disappear. And you did. For 6 months, you were practically invisible in my own home. Something flickered across his face. Until Friday night, when I saw you at Velvet. Saw who you really are beneath the uniform and the silence. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. What do you want from me? Are you going to fire me? Because I can leave right now, I can... Sit down. This time it was definitely a command, layered with authority I didn't dare challenge. I sat. Ryan O'Sullivan contacted me yesterday, Harrison said, and the words hit like a physical blow. Actually, his father contacted me, requesting a favor. Professional courtesy between organizations, you understand. They're looking for a young woman who disappeared from Denver 2 years ago. Medium height, dark hair, hazel eyes. Goes by the name Harper. The description matched my housekeeper perfectly. The room spun around me. He knew. Ryan knew where I was. After 2 years of careful invisibility, of building a new life from nothing, it was over. What did you tell them? My voice was barely a whisper. Harrison stood, moving around the desk to lean against it, closer to me but still maintaining a professional distance. I told them I'd look into it, that I'd be in touch if I found anything. Relief crashed through me, so intense it was almost painful. Thank you. I'll leave today, right now. I won't... I'm not finished. He held up a hand. Patrick O'Sullivan is useful to me. His organization controls territory I need for certain operations. A favor owed is currency I can use in the future. Understanding dawned, cold and heavy. You're going to give me back to him, to Ryan. That would be the smart play, Harrison agreed, his expression neutral. Strategically, politically, it's what I should do. Please. I hated the desperation in my voice, hated begging, but I was drowning and he was the only lifeline available. Please don't. You don't know what he's like, what he did. Actually, I do. Harrison picked up another folder, thinner than the first. Ryan O'Sullivan, 28. 3 restraining orders, 2 assault charges dropped, 1 attempted murder charge that disappeared along with the witness. He's charming, intelligent, and deeply unstable. A dangerous combination. He tossed the folder back onto the desk. The question isn't whether you need protection from him. You clearly do. The question is why I should provide it. I stared at him, trying to read something in his expression beyond cold calculation. Why did you have me investigated? Why not just fire me after the party? Because you lied to me. He moved closer, near enough now that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Not with words necessarily, but with omissions. You've been hiding in my house, using my employment as cover, all while keeping secrets that could create complications. I'm sorry. The apology felt hollow, inadequate. I never meant to bring trouble to you. Didn't you? His hand reached out, his thumb brushing along my jawline, a gesture intimate and possessive that made my breath catch. You came to work in the house of one of the most powerful men in the city. Did you really think that wouldn't eventually draw attention? I pulled back from his touch, confused and overwhelmed. What do you want from me, Mr. Cole? Just tell me what you want. His hand dropped, but his gaze remained intense, searching. The truth would be a start. Tell me about Ryan. Tell me why you're so afraid of him that you've spent 2 years looking over your shoulder. The request should have been simple, but excavating those memories felt like opening a grave I'd worked hard to seal. Still, what choice did I have? He held all the power here, all the cards. I took a shaky breath. I met Ryan my senior year at a party. He was older, sophisticated, attentive in ways that felt flattering instead of suffocating. At first, I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm study. It started small. Questions about where I'd been, who I'd talked to, then checking my phone, then deciding what I could wear, where I could go. By the time I graduated, I barely recognized myself. Harrison had moved back to lean against his desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. But he was listening, really listening. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward, begged forgiveness, blamed stress from his father's business. I believed him. I laughed bitterly. I actually believed him. It would be different next time, he promised. He'd get help, be better. But it wasn't different, Harrison said quietly. No, it got worse, and I got better at hiding it. Makeup to cover bruises, excuses for canceled plans. My friends started to drift away. That's what he wanted, I realized later. To isolate me. I met Harrison's gaze, needing him to understand. I tried to leave 3 times. The first 2 times, he found me within days, convinced me to come back with threats and promises mixed together until I couldn't tell them apart. And the third time? The third time I waited until he was arrested on assault charges that would actually stick. Or I thought they would. I took every dollar I'd saved, changed my hair, my name, and ran as far as I could with what I had. That was 2 years ago. Silence settled between us, heavy with implications neither of us wanted to voice. Finally, Harrison spoke. You should have told me. When you applied for the job, you should have disclosed that you were running from the O'Sullivans. Would you have hired me if I had? No, he admitted. I wouldn't have. Then you understand why I didn't. I stood, my legs unsteady. I'll pack my things and leave today. I'm sorry for bringing complications to your door. Sit down, Harper. His voice had changed, softer but no less commanding. I'm not finished. What else is there? You know everything now. You know I'm a liability, that keeping me here could damage your relationship with the O'Sullivans. The smart play, like you said, is to let me go. I rarely make the smart play when it comes to things I want. He moved closer again, this time invading my space deliberately, forcing me to acknowledge his presence, his power, his interest. And I find that I want to keep you here, Harper. Even knowing the complications, especially knowing them. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why? His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing across my lower lip in a gesture that was equal parts tender and possessive. Because for 6 months, you moved through my house like a ghost. And then I saw you Friday night, in that red dress, dancing like you were free. And I realized I'd been blind to something extraordinary right under my nose. Mr. Cole. Harrison. His thumb pressed slightly against my lip. When we're alone like this, call me Harrison. This is a mistake. But I didn't pull away. Couldn't seem to make my body obey my mind's warnings. You said it yourself. I'm a complication you don't need. Perhaps, but I'm going to keep you anyway. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. Under my protection. In my house. Where Ryan O'Sullivan and his father can't reach you. And what do you want in exchange? I forced myself to ask the question, to understand the price of this protection. Something dark and complex moved across his face. I haven't decided yet. But Harper, understand this. If you accept my protection, you accept my authority. Your safety becomes my responsibility, and I take my responsibilities very seriously. The implication was clear. Protection came with strings, with obligations I couldn't yet see. But what choice did I have? Return to running, always looking over my shoulder, always one step ahead of Ryan's search, or accept Harrison's offer and trade one cage for another. At least this cage came with bars made of something other than violence. Okay, I whispered. I accept your protection. Harrison's smile was slow, satisfied, like a predator who'd successfully cornered prey. Good girl. Now, let's discuss some changes to your employment arrangement. The changes Harrison implemented were immediate and unsettling. I was moved from the servants' quarters, a small room on the 3rd floor that I'd barely furnished, to a guest suite on the 2nd floor, 3 doors down from his own master bedroom. Mrs. Chen delivered the news with her usual efficiency, but I caught the speculation in her eyes. Staff always knew when dynamics shifted, when boundaries blurred. The suite was beautiful in an impersonal way. A king-sized bed with silk sheets, a sitting area with a view of the gardens, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub and rainfall shower. It was 3 times the size of my studio apartment, and infinitely more comfortable. It was also, unmistakably, a gilded cage. Your duties will be adjusted, Mrs. Chen informed me, as she helped move my meager belongings. Mr. Cole wants you to focus on his personal spaces exclusively. The study, his bedroom, the private gym. No one else is to enter those areas without his permission. Translation. I was being isolated from the other staff, kept close and under surveillance. Does he always micromanage his household like this? Mrs. Chen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. Mr. Cole has his reasons for everything he does. It's not our place to question them. That night, after unpacking the few items that constituted my entire life, I found a note slipped under my door on heavy cardstock that probably cost more than my old bedding. Dinner at 8, my private dining room. Don't be late. H. The private dining room was smaller than the formal one, designed for intimate gatherings rather than the sprawling dinner parties Harrison occasionally hosted. A table for 2 was set with china so delicate it looked like it might shatter if I breathed wrong. Candles provided soft lighting, creating shadows that made the room feel both romantic and vaguely threatening. Harrison was already seated, dressed casually in dark slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The informality should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt more dangerous than his usual suits, like seeing a shark without its armor. You changed, he observed as I entered. I'd put on one of the few dresses I owned, a simple navy sheath that had seemed appropriate for whatever this was. You said dinner. I assumed. I trailed off, suddenly uncertain. It's fine. You look lovely. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." A man I'd never seen before, not one of the regular catering staff, appeared with wine, pouring for Harrison before offering the bottle to me. I shook my head, and water was provided instead. "You don't drink?" Harrison asked, noting my refusal. "Not much. I like to stay alert." The truth was that Ryan had used alcohol as a tool, getting me drunk to lower my defenses, to make me compliant. I'd learned to associate drinking with losing control, and control was all I had left. Harrison nodded as if I'd confirmed something. "Smart. In my world, being alert is often the difference between living and dying." The first course arrived, some kind of soup that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce. We ate in silence for a few moments before Harrison spoke again. "Tell me about your brother. Cooper, isn't it?" The sudden shift caught me off guard. "How do you—" "Right, the investigation. I like to be thorough." He set down his spoon, giving me his full attention. "Cerebral palsy, you said. How severe?" Something about his genuine interest made my throat tight. No one ever asked about Cooper. He can walk with assistance, has limited use of his hands. The care facility in Denver is one of the best in the state, but it's expensive. Most of my paycheck goes to covering what insurance doesn't. And when you ran from Ryan, you had to leave Cooper behind. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "I visit when I can, but it's risky. Ryan knows how much Cooper means to me. I can't give him that leverage." "What if I told you Cooper could be transferred here? To a facility in the city, under a different name, with top-tier care that money can buy?" My fork clattered against my plate. "Why would you do that?" "Because you need to know your brother is safe and well cared for, and because I can." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those storm-gray eyes. "Consider it part of my protection arrangement." I struggled for words. "That's incredibly generous. Too generous. What do you want in return?" "Your trust." He said it simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I want you to stop looking at me like I'm going to hurt you, to understand that when I offer protection, I mean it absolutely." "I don't understand you," I admitted. "One moment you're threatening to hand me over to the O'Sullivans, the next you're offering to move my brother across the country. What game are you playing?" "No game." He stood, moving to the sideboard where a bottle of scotch waited. He poured himself 2 fingers before continuing. "I told you I rarely make the smart play when it comes to things I want. You, Harper, are something I've decided I want, and I protect what's mine. I'm not yours." The protest sounded weak even to my own ears. He smiled, a predator's smile that made heat pool low in my belly despite my better judgment. "Not yet, but you will be." The certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it created a dangerous flutter of anticipation that I quickly tried to suppress. The second course arrived, perfectly seared scallops that probably cost more than I made in a week. We ate, and Harrison asked more questions. About my degree, about the books I loved, about who I'd been before Ryan had tried to erase her. It felt like an interview, but also like something more intimate, like he was learning me, piece by piece, storing away information for later use. "The Irish are going to be a problem," he said suddenly, shifting topics as the dishes were cleared. "Patrick O'Sullivan isn't the type to accept a polite refusal. When I tell him I haven't found you, he'll push back. Then tell him you did find me." I set down my water glass, meeting his gaze directly. "Tell him I'm under your protection now, that this is your territory and your decision. That would start a war." He said it casually, but I heard the weight beneath the words. Better a war than giving me back to Ryan. The thought of returning to him, of being trapped in that cycle again, made my stomach roil. I'd rather die than go back. Something dangerous flashed in Harrison's eyes. No one is dying, and no one is going back. He stood, coming around the table to stand behind my chair. His hands settled on my shoulders, warm and possessive. But there will be consequences, Harper. The O'Sullivans won't let this go quietly. Are you prepared for what that means? I tilted my head back to look up at him. What does it mean? It means you can't leave this property without security. It means there will be violence, probably soon. It means accepting that I'm going to do things, terrible things, to keep you safe. His thumbs traced circles on my shoulders, the gesture almost soothing despite his words. Can you live with that? I thought about Ryan's fists, about the fear that had been my constant companion for years, about the choice between a man who hurt me to control me and a man who would hurt others to protect me. Yes, I said quietly. I can live with that. His hands tightened on my shoulders, then released. Good, because Patrick O'Sullivan is coming to visit tomorrow, and I think it's time we made clear where you stand. Patrick O'Sullivan arrived at noon in a convoy of black SUVs that rolled up the circular drive like an invasion force. I watched from the second-floor window of my suite, my hands pressed against the glass, as men in expensive suits emerged with the coordinated precision of soldiers. Ryan wasn't among them. I'd checked, my eyes scanning each face for the one that still haunted my nightmares. Relief warred with disappointment. I wanted this over, but I wasn't ready to face him. Might never be ready. Stay in your room. Harrison's voice came from the doorway, and I jumped. I hadn't heard him enter. Don't come down under any circumstances, do you understand? I turned from the window. He was in full armor today, three-piece suit, dark and perfectly tailored, the kind of outfit that announced power before he spoke a word. But his expression held something I hadn't seen before. Concern, maybe, or something close to it. What are you going to tell him? The truth. That you're under my protection, that I'm not returning you to his son, and that anyone who attempts to take you will face consequences. He moved closer, his hand reaching out to cup my face, his thumb brushing along my cheekbone. Trust me, Harper. I've handled worse than Patrick O'Sullivan. But he's your ally. You said, alliances can be rebuilt. You can't. The simplicity of the statement stole my breath. Then his mouth was on mine, claiming a kiss that felt like ownership and promise wrapped together. When he pulled back, his eyes had darkened to storm clouds. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. He was gone before I could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. I moved back to the window, watching as he emerged onto the front steps to greet Patrick O'Sullivan. Even from this distance, I could see the older man's fury in his rigid posture, the aggressive way he gestured toward Harrison. The meeting lasted 2 hours. I counted every minute, pacing my suite like a caged animal, jumping at every sound. Mrs. Chen brought lunch that I couldn't eat, her face carefully neutral as she set the tray down without comment. Finally, I heard vehicles starting, engines roaring to life. The convoy departed with the same military precision it had arrived with, leaving nothing but tire marks on the pristine drive. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then Harrison's knock. 3 precise raps that I'd already learned to recognize. It's me. Open up. He looked exhausted when I let him in, his jacket removed, tie loosened, the first time I'd seen his armor crack. He moved past me to sink onto the sofa in my sitting area, running both hands through his hair. How bad? I asked, closing the door. About as bad as expected. He looked up at me, and I saw something in his expression that made my chest tighten. Patrick isn't happy. Claims I'm disrespecting him by refusing to return his son's property. I'm not property. I made that clear. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Several times, with increasingly colorful language. The smile faded. But he's right that this creates problems. The Irish control the West Side docks, handle most of my European shipments. They can make things difficult. I moved to sit beside him, the weight of guilt pressing down. This is my fault. You should have just... Don't. His hand caught mine, fingers intertwining. Don't suggest I should have given you back to him. That was never an option, Harper. Not from the moment I decided you were mine to protect. Why? I needed to understand what drove him to this decision, to risking his business relationships and possibly more for someone he barely knew. Why me? You said yourself I'm a complication. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more raw than I'd heard it. My sister, younger than me by 5 years. She married a man who seemed perfect on paper. Good family, legitimate business, all the right connections. He stared at our joined hands. He was also beating her bloody every time she disappointed him. By the time we found out, she was too afraid to leave. Said she loved him, that it was her fault for making him angry. My heart clenched. What happened? I took care of it. The way he said it left no doubt what that meant. Made it clear that touching her again would be the last thing he ever did. He left town, and she got therapy, rebuilt her life. But I learned something from that. There are lines even I won't cross. Hurting women is one of them. He turned to face me fully, his free hand coming up to cup my face. So when I saw you in that red dress, dancing like you were finally free, and then learned you'd spent 2 years running from a man who terrorized you, there was no choice to make, Harper. I was always going to protect you. Tears burned my eyes, and this time I let them fall. Thank you. He pulled me against his chest, arms wrapping around me with surprising gentleness. We sat like that for long minutes, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, his hand stroking my hair. There's something else, he said finally, and tension crept into his voice. Ryan is here, in the city. I jerked back. What? Patrick brought him. Left him at a hotel downtown while we had our meeting. Harrison's jaw tightened. He wants a face-to-face. Says Ryan deserves a chance to talk to you, to clear up misunderstandings. No. The word came out fierce, absolute. I won't see him. I can't. I told Patrick that. Harrison's hand moved to the back of my neck, his grip firm and grounding. But he's pushing, threatening to escalate things if we don't allow at least one supervised meeting. Supervised by who? Me, here, in my house, with my security present. He studied my face, reading my fear. I would never let him hurt you again, Harper. But this might be the only way to end this peacefully. To make Ryan understand that you're done. That no amount of pressure will change that. I wanted to refuse. Wanted to hide in this room and pretend Ryan didn't exist. But I'd been running for 2 years, and running hadn't saved me. Maybe confrontation, with Harrison's power behind me, would. Okay, I whispered. One meeting. But you have to promise you'll be there. That you won't leave me alone with him. I promise. He pulled me close again, and I felt his lips against my hair. I'm not going anywhere. The meeting was scheduled for the next evening. Harrison arranged for Cooper to be transferred that morning, sending a team to Denver to facilitate the move. When he told me, I broke down completely, sobbing against his chest while he held me and murmured reassurances in a voice that gentled for me alone. Your brother will be safe here, he promised. Better care than Denver could provide, and security that would make Fort Knox jealous. No one touches what's mine, Harper. Not Ryan. Not anyone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Anticipation and dread warred in my chest, making my heart race and my hands shake. Around midnight, I gave up trying, wrapping myself in the silk robe that had been provided and padding on bare feet to the window. A knock at my door made me turn. Harrison stood in the hallway, also unable to sleep apparently, dressed in sleep pants and nothing else. The sight of his bare chest, defined muscles, and the tattoo I'd noticed before, angel wings spanning his shoulder blades, made heat pool low in my belly despite my anxiety. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, stepping inside without invitation, nervous about tomorrow. He closed the door behind him, moving to stand beside me at the window. "He can't hurt you anymore, Harper. I won't allow it. It's not just the physical hurt." I struggled to put it into words. It's seeing him again, being in the same room, knowing he still thinks he has some claim on me. Then we'll make it clear he doesn't. Harrison turned me to face him, his hands on my shoulders. "You're not that scared girl anymore. You're stronger than you know, and you're not alone." I looked up at him, at this dangerous man who'd somehow become my protector, my shield against the past. Impulsively, I rose on my toes and kissed him, pouring into it all my gratitude and fear and the strange, growing feeling I didn't want to name. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me flush against his bare chest. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate. His hand slid down to my waist, then lower, gripping my hips through the silk robe. "Harper." My name was a growl against my lips. "Tell me to stop." "Don't stop." I barely recognized my own voice, breathless and wanting. "Please don't stop." He lifted me effortlessly, my legs wrapping around his waist as he carried me to the bed. We tumbled onto silk sheets, mouths never breaking contact, hands exploring with increasing urgency. "Are you sure?" he asked, pulling back just enough to look at me, to make certain. "Yes." I pulled him back down. Make me forget him. Make me forget I was ever afraid. Harrison proceeded to do exactly that, his hands and mouth erasing Ryan from my memory, replacing fear with pleasure, control with choice. When he finally entered me, his eyes locked on mine, I felt something shift inside me. Not just physical, though the sensation was overwhelming, but something deeper, a claiming that went both ways. "Mine," he murmured against my neck as we moved together. "Say it." "Yours." And in that moment, wrapped in his arms, sheltered by his strength, I meant it absolutely. Afterward, we lay tangled together, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "About tomorrow," he said quietly. "I need you to know something." "What?" "If Ryan tries anything, and I mean anything at all, I'm going to kill him." He said it calmly, matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. "Patrick's son or not, alliance be damned. If he threatens you, if he even makes you uncomfortable, I will end him. Do you understand?" I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt only relief. "I understand." "Good." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "Now try to sleep. You need your strength for tomorrow." I fell asleep in his arms, safer than I'd felt in 2 years. And if I dreamed of storm-gray eyes instead of Ryan's fists, well, that felt like progress. Ryan arrived precisely at 7, escorted by 2 of Harrison's security team rather than his own. A psychological advantage, Harrison had explained that morning over coffee. Meeting in his territory, surrounded by his people, would establish from the start that this was Harrison's domain. I waited in the study, Harrison beside me, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. I'd dressed carefully, nothing that Ryan had ever seen me in, choosing instead a simple black dress that was elegant but modest, my hair pulled back in a severe bun, armor of my own. When Ryan entered, my body's reaction was immediate and visceral. My hands started shaking, my breath caught, fear rising like bile in my throat. But Harrison's hand pressed against my back, grounding me, reminding me I wasn't alone. Ryan looked different. Thinner, harder, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of stress or anger or both. But his smile was the same. Charming, disarming, the mask he wore to hide the monster beneath. Harper. He moved toward me, arms outstretched for an embrace. Harrison stepped between us, his body a wall. That's close enough. Ryan's smile tightened. I just want to talk to my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, I corrected, my voice stronger than I expected. We're done, Ryan. We've been done for 2 years. Baby, don't say that. His voice took on that pleading quality I remembered. The tone he used right before his fists followed his words. I know I made mistakes, but I've changed. I've been getting help, going to therapy. I'm better now. I don't care. I stepped around Harrison, needing to face this head on. You had 2 years to change, Ryan. 2 years to leave me alone. Instead, you sent your father to find me, to drag me back like I'm your property. You are mine. The mask slipped, fury bleeding through. We're together, Harper. You don't get to just leave. Watch me. I lifted my chin, channeling every ounce of the woman I'd become in his absence. I'm not afraid of you anymore. You should be. He lunged forward, but Harrison moved faster, his fist connecting with Ryan's jaw with devastating precision. Ryan went down hard, blood streaming from his split lip. Security moved in immediately, hauling Ryan to his feet. He struggled against their grip, his eyes wild and fixed on me. You're making a mistake, Harper. You think he's better than me? He's worse. He's a criminal, a killer. Yes, he is. I moved closer, past Harrison's protective stance, needing Ryan to see my certainty. But he's never hurt me, never made me afraid, never controlled me. So yes, Ryan, he is better than you. Anyone would be better than you. You can't do this. Ryan's voice cracked. I love you. No, you don't. The words came easily now, truth I'd been too afraid to speak before. You never loved me. You loved controlling me, owning me. But I'm not yours anymore. I never was, really. The O'Sullivans don't forget, Harper. Ryan's voice turned cold, dangerous. My father won't let this go. Cole can't protect you forever. Harrison moved to stand beside me, his arm sliding around my waist. Try me. Tell your father that Harper is under my permanent protection, that any attempt to harm her or contact her will be considered an act of war. See how that conversation goes. Ryan's eyes bounced between us, calculating, recognizing the futility of his position. This isn't over. Yes, Harrison said quietly. It is. Remove him. Security dragged Ryan toward the door. He fought them every step, shouting threats and profanities until his voice faded down the hallway. When the front door finally slammed, the sound echoed through the house like punctuation. I sagged against Harrison, adrenaline draining away and leaving me hollow. Is it really over? The easy part is. Harrison turned me to face him, his hands cupping my face with surprising gentleness. Patrick won't let this go without a fight. There will be consequences, complications. Are you still sure this is what you want? I thought about the question, about everything that had happened in the past week, about being seen, really seen, for the first time in years, about Harrison's protection, his possessiveness that felt like safety rather than suffocation, about the way he looked at me like I was precious, valuable, worth fighting for. I'm sure. I placed my hands over his. I'm not running anymore. Good. He kissed me, deep and claiming, because I'm not letting you go. The next few weeks were tense. Patrick O'Sullivan made good on his threats, creating problems with shipments, stirring up trouble with other organizations, trying to isolate Harrison politically. But Harrison handled each challenge with the same cold efficiency he applied to everything, his power and influence proving stronger than Patrick's fury. Cooper arrived from Denver, settling into a care facility so luxurious it made his previous home look like a prison. When I visited him the first time, tears streaming down my face, he'd gripped my hand with his limited mobility and smiled. "You found someone who makes you happy," he said, his words slow but clear. "I can see it on your face." And he was right. Somewhere between being seen in a red dress and standing up to Ryan, between Harrison's protection and his passion, I had found something like happiness. It wasn't simple. Nothing with Harrison could be simple, but it was real. 3 months after that confrontation in the study, Harrison called me into his office. I expected another security briefing, another update on the O'Sullivan situation that had finally started to cool. Instead, I found him standing by the window, a small velvet box in his hand. "I'm not good at this," he said without preamble. "At feelings, at relationships that don't involve contracts and obligations. But you've become essential to me, Harper. Not just someone I'm protecting, but someone I want beside me. Always." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took my breath away. Not ostentatious. Harrison knew me better than that, but beautiful in its elegant simplicity. A single diamond, flawless and clear, set in platinum. "Marry me." Not quite a question, but not quite a command either. Somewhere in between, in that space we'd learned to occupy together. I thought about saying yes, about the life it would mean, luxury beyond anything I'd imagined, but also danger, always looking over my shoulder for the next threat. About the man offering it, dangerous, possessive, capable of terrible violence, but also protective, gentle with me in ways he showed no one else. Yes. The word came easily, naturally, but on one condition. His eyebrow raised. "You're negotiating?" "I'm not your property, Harrison. I'm your partner, equal footing, or this doesn't work." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming him from dangerous to devastating. "Partners, then. Equal footing." He slid the ring onto my finger, then pulled me close. "Though I reserve the right to be overprotective. I can live with that." I kissed him, sealing the promise, the partnership, the life we'd chosen together. Outside the study windows, rain began to fall, washing the city clean, and for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring, because I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't running. I was standing still, standing strong, standing with a man who saw me, really saw me, and chose me anyway. The simple maid the MAFIA boss never noticed had become the woman he couldn't live without. And in his storm-gray eyes, I finally saw myself reflected back, not as someone to be saved, but as someone worth fighting for. Together we were dangerous. Together we were powerful. Together, we were finally home.